Most people think GPT-5 inside Copilot makes the researcher agent redundant. Those people are wrong, painfully wrong. The confusion comes from the illusion of intelligence, the part where GPT-5 answers in flawless business PowerPoint English, complete with bullet points, confidence, and plausible references. It sounds like knowledge. It's actually performance art. Copilot powered by GPT-5 is what happens when language mastery gets mistaken for truth. It's dazzling. It generates a leadership strategy in seconds, complete with a risk register and a timeline that looks like it came straight from a consultant's deck. But beneath that shiny fluency, no citation trail, no retrieval log, just synthetic coherence. Now contrast that with the researcher agent. It is slow, obsessive, and methodical, more librarian than visionary. It asks clarifying questions, it pauses to fetch sources, it compiles lineage you can audit, and yes, it takes minutes, sometimes 9 of them, to deliver the same type of output that Copilot spits out in 10 seconds. The difference is that one of them can be defended in a governance review, and the other will get you politely removed from the conference room. Speed versus integrity. Convenience versus compliance. Enterprises like yours live and die by that axis. GPT-5 gives velocity, the agent gives veracity. You can choose which one you value most, but not at the same time. Copilot's strength, the fast lie of generative fluency. The brilliance of GPT-5 lies in something known as chain of thought reasoning. Think of it as internal monologue for machines, a hidden process where the model drafts outlines, evaluates options, and simulates planning before giving you an answer. It's what allows Copilot to act like a brilliant strategist trapped inside Word. You type, "Help me prepare a leadership strategy," and it replies with milestones, dependencies, and delivery risks so polished that you could present them immediately. The problem? That horsepower is directed at coherence, not correctness. GPT-5 connects dots based on probability, not provenance. It can reference documents from SharePoint or Teams, but it cannot guarantee those references created the reasoning behind its answer. It's like asking an intern to draft a company policy after glancing at 3 PowerPoint slides and a blog post. What you'll get back looks professional, cites a few familiar phrases, but you have no proof those citations inform the logic. This is why GPT-5 feels irresistible. It imitates competence. You ask, it answers. You correct, it adjusts. The loop is instant and conversational. The visible speed gives the illusion of reliability because we conflate response time with thoughtfulness. When Copilot finishes typing before your coffee finishes brewing, it feels like intelligence. Unfortunately, in enterprise architecture, feelings don't pass audits. Think of Copilot as the gifted intern, charismatic, articulate, and entirely undocumented. You'll adore its drafts, you'll quote its phrasing in meetings, and then one day you'll realize nobody remembers where those numbers came from. Every unverified paragraph it produces becomes intellectual debt. Content you must later justify to compliance reviewers who prefer citations over enthusiasm. And this is where most professionals misstep. They promote speed as the victory condition. They forget that artificial fluency without traceability creates a governance nightmare. The more fluent GPT-5 becomes, the more dangerous it gets in regulated environments because it hides its uncertainty elegantly. The prose is clean, the confidence is absolute, the evidence is missing. Here's the kicker. Copilot's chain of thought reasoning isn't built for auditable research. It's optimized for task completion. When GPT-5 plans a project, it's predicting what a competent human would plan given the prompt and context, not verifying those steps against organizational standards. It's synthetic synthesis, not verified analysis. Yet that's precisely why it thrives in productivity scenarios, drafting emails, writing summaries, brainstorming outlines. Those don't require forensic provenance. You can tolerate minor inaccuracy because the purpose is momentum, not verification. But hand that same GPT-5 summary to a regulator or a finance auditor, and you've just escalated from clever tool use to architectural liability. Generative fluency without traceability becomes a compliance risk vector. When users copy AI text into Power BI dashboards, retention policies, or executive reports, they embed unverifiable claims inside systems designed for governance. That's not efficiency, that's contamination. Everything about Copilot's design incentivizes flow. It's built to keep you moving. Ask it another question, and it continues contextually without restarting its reasoning loop. That persistence, the way it picks up previous context, is spectacular for daily productivity. But in governance, context persistence without fresh verification equals compounding error. Still, we shouldn't vilify Copilot. It's not meant to be the watchdog of integrity. It's the facilitator of progress. Used wisely, it accelerates ideation and lets humans focus on originality rather than formatting. What damages enterprises isn't GPT-5's fluency, it's the assumption that fluency equals fact. The danger is managerial, not mechanical. So when exactly does this shiny assistant transform from helpful companion into architectural liability? When the content must survive scrutiny, when every assertion needs lineage, when probably right stops being acceptable. Enter the agent, the researcher agent, where governance lives. If Copilot is the intern who dazzles the boardroom with fluent nonsense, the researcher agent is the senior auditor with a clipboard, a suspicion, and infinite patience. It doesn't charm, it interrogates. It doesn't sprint, it cross-examines every source. Its purpose is not creativity, it's credibility. When you invoke the researcher agent, the tone of interaction changes immediately. Instead of sprinting into an answer, it asks clarifying questions. What scope? Which document set? Should citations include internal repositories or external verified sources? Those questions, while undeniably irritating to impatient users, mark the start of auditability. Every clarifying loop defines the boundaries of traceable logic. Each fetch cycle generates metadata, where it looked, how long, what confidence weight it assigned. It isn't stalling, it's notarizing. Architecturally, the agent is built on top of retrieval orchestration rather than probabilistic continuation. GPT-5 predicts, the agent verifies. That's not a small difference. GPT-5 produces a polished paragraph, the agent produces a defensible record. It executes multiple verification passes, mapping references, cross-checking conflicting statements, reconciling versions between SharePoint, Fabric, and even sanctioned external repositories. It's like the operating system of governance, complete with its own checksum of truth. The patience is deliberate. A professional demonstrated this publicly. GPT-5 resolved the planning prompt within seconds, while the agent took 9 full minutes, cycling through external validation before producing what resembled a research paper. That disparity isn't inefficiency, it's design philosophy. The time represents computational diligence. The agent generates provenance logs, citations, and structured notes because compliance requires proof of process, not just deliverables. In governance terms, latency equals legitimacy. Yes, it feels slow. You can practically watch your ambition age while it compiles evidence. But that's precisely the kind of slowness enterprises pay consultants to simulate manually. The agent automates tedium that humans perform with footnotes and review meetings. It's not writing with style, it's writing with receipts. Think of Copilot as a creative sprint, energized, linear, impatient. Think of the agent as a laboratory experiment. Every step is time-stamped, every reagent labeled. If Copilot delivers a result, the agent delivers a dataset with provenance, methodology, and margin notes explaining uncertainty. One generates outcomes, the other preserves accountability. This architecture matters most in regulated environments. A Copilot draft may inform brainstorming, but for anything that touches audit trails, data governance, or executive reporting, the agent becomes non-negotiable. Its chain of custody extends through the M365 ecosystem. Queries trace to Fabric datasets, citations map back to Microsoft Learn or internal knowledge bases, and final summaries embed lineage so auditors can recreate the reasoning path. That's not over-engineering, that's survival under compliance regimes. Some users call the agent overkill until a regulator asks, which document informed this recommendation? That conversation ends awkwardly when your only answer is, Copilot suggested it. The agent, however, can reproduce the evidence in its log structure, an XML-like output specifying source, timestamp, and verification step. In governance language, that's admissible testimony. So while GPT-5's brilliance lies in fluid reasoning, the researcher agent's power lies in fixed accountability. The two exist in separate architectural layers. One optimizes throughput, the other ensures traceability. Dismiss the agent, and you're effectively removing the black box recorder from your enterprise aircraft. Enjoy the flight until something crashes. Now that you understand its purpose and its patience, the question becomes operational. When is the agent simply wise to use, and when is it mandatory? The 5 mandatory scenarios. Let's make this painfully simple. There are moments when using GPT-5 in Copilot isn't just lazy, it's architecturally inappropriate. These are the environments where speed becomes malpractice, where fluency without verification equals non-compliance. In these cases, the agent isn't a luxury, it's a legal requirement dressed up as a software feature. The first category is governance documentation. I can already hear someone saying, but Copilot can draft that faster. Correct, and dangerously so. Drafting a data loss prevention policy, a retention rule, or an acceptable use guideline with a generative model is inviting hallucinations into your regulatory fabric. These documents depend on organizational precedent and Microsoft's official frameworks, like those hidden deep inside Microsoft Learn or your own compliance center. GPT-5 can mimic policy tone, but it cannot prove that a clause aligns with the current retention baseline. The agent, however, maps every assertion to a verified source, logs the lookup path, and produces an output suitable for audit inclusion. When an auditor asks which source informed Section 4.2 of your policy, only the agent can provide the answer without nervous silence. Think of this as the first immutable rule. Governance without lineage is guesswork. The second scenario is financial or regulatory reporting. Any document that feeds numbers into executive decisions or investor relations requires traceable lineage. Copilot may summarize financial data beautifully, but summaries lack reproducibility. You cannot recreate how those numbers were derived. The agent, on the other hand, performs a multi-stage verification process. It connects to Fabric datasets, cross-checks purview classifications, and embeds reference IDs linking each statement to its origin system. When the financial controller or regulator requests evidence, the agent can peel back the reasoning exactly as a transparent audit trail. GPT-5 cannot. Substituting Copilot here is like hiring a poet to run your accounting ledger. Eloquent chaos. Now the third domain, enterprise learning or knowledge articles. Internal wikis, onboarding content, and training documents often masquerade as harmless prose. They're not. These materials propagate organizational truth. When Copilot fabricates a method or misquotes licensing requirements, that misinformation scales through your workforce faster than correction memos can. The agent eliminates that by validating every paragraph against corporate repositories, Microsoft documentation, or predefined internal decks. It doesn't simply retrieve, it triangulates. A generated sentence passes only after consistent verification across multiple trusted nodes. The product may read slower, but it will survive the scrutiny of your legal department. That makes it not optional but mandatory whenever internal education doubles as policy communication. Fourth, security and identity audits within Entra. This is the arena where shortcuts hurt the most. Suppose you ask Copilot for a summary of privileged access changes or role assignments. It will happily summarize logs, maybe even suggest optimizations, but its summary lacks structural fidelity. It can't trace who changed what, when, and under which policy constraint. The agent, conversely, can. It traverses entitlement management, conditional access records, and group membership structures, producing a verifiable map of identity lineage. When compliance officers demand to know why a service principal still has elevated privileges, Copilot said it was fine, doesn't hold up. In audit terms, the agent's slower path generates the only admissible version of truth. Finally, competitive or market analysis for executives. You'd think this one lives safely in the gray zone of creativity. No. The moment an AI-generated insight influences corporate positioning or investor communication, corroboration becomes non-negotiable. Copilot delivers confidence, the agent delivers citations. GPT-5 can collate opinions from across the web, but it lacks visibility into source bias and publication reliability. The agent indexes diverse sources, assigns credibility weights, and embeds digital citations. It's the difference between industry sources suggest and verified data from specific dataset confirms. Executives rely on traceable insight, not synthetic enthusiasm. Across all 5 use cases, the rule is the same. Speed tolerates uncertainty. Compliance never does. The architectures themselves tell you the intended usage. Copilot, GPT-5, is designed for interactivity and productivity, experience optimized for iteration. The agent's core is structured orchestration, where every call, response, and citation forms a breadcrumb trail. Using one in place of the other isn't clever multitasking, it's crossing organizational DNA. Now let's isolate the pattern. Governance documents depend on legal precedent, financial reporting depends on reproducible data, knowledge articles depend on accuracy of fact. Identity audits depend on provenance. Market analysis depends on multi-source credibility. None of these can accept close enough. They require deterministic confidence, traceable cause and effect embedded within the answer itself. GPT-5 offers none of that. It promises plausible text, not provable truth. Yes, in each of these settings, speed is tempting. The intern part of your brain loves when the draft appears instantly. But compliance doesn't reward spontaneity, it rewards evidence. If it feeds a Power BI dashboard, touches an audit trail, or informs a leadership decision, the chatbot must be replaced by the agent desk. Every regulated process in Microsoft 365 follows this hierarchy. Copilot accelerates creativity. The agent anchors accountability. And before you argue that Copilot checked a SharePoint folder so it's fine, remember, referencing a document is not the same as validating a document. GPT-5 might read it, the agent proves it governed the reasoning. That singular architectural distinction defines whether your enterprise outputs are useful drafts or legally defensible artifacts. So as you decide which AI does the talking, ask one question: will someone have to prove this later? If the answer is yes, you've already chosen the agent. Because in regulated architecture, the fastest route to disaster is thinking you can sneak GPT-5 past compliance. The software may forgive you, the auditors won't. That's the boundary line: sharp, documented, and immutable. Now, what happens when you need both speed and certainty? There is a method for that hybrid workflow. The hybrid workflow, speed meets verification. Here's the irony. The people most likely to misuse GPT-5 are the ones with the highest productivity metrics. They're rewarded for velocity, not veracity. Fortunately, there's a workflow that reconciles both, the hybrid model. It's the architectural handshake between Copilot's speed and the agent's sobriety. Professionals who master this balance don't toggle between tools, they choreograph them. Step 1. Ideate with GPT-5. Begin every complex task by letting Copilot generate the raw scaffolding. Policy outline, market structure, executive brief, whatever the objective, let it explode onto the page. That's where GPT-5's chain of thought brilliance shines. It builds breadth in seconds, extending context far faster than you ever could manually. The goal here isn't truth, it's topology. You're mapping surface area, identifying all the places that'll eventually require evidence. Step 2, transfer critical claims into the agent for verification. Treat every statistic, quotation, or declarative statement in that Copilot draft as a suspect until proven innocent. Feed them to the researcher agent, one at a time if necessary, and command it to trace each back to canonical sources, documentation, purview lineage, or external validated data. You'll notice the instant tonal shift. The agent doesn't joke, it interrogates. Step 3. Integrate the agent's citations back into the Copilot environment. Once the agent issues verified material, complete with references, you stitch that content back into the workspace. Copilot is now free to polish language, apply tone consistency, and summarize findings without touching the evidentiary core. Think of it as giving the intern footnotes from the auditor so their final draft won't embarrass you in court. This cycle, generation, verification, integration, forms what I call iterative synthesis. It's like continuous integration for knowledge work. GPT-5 builds the code, the agent runs the tests. Failures aren't errors, they're checkpoints. Each iteration hardens the content until every paragraph has passed at least one verification loop. Professionals who adopt this model achieve something even Microsoft didn't quite anticipate: reproducible intelligence. Every insight now carries its own mini provenance file. So you can revalidate outputs months later, long after the original request. In audits, that kind of reproducibility is worth more than eloquence. Of course, the temptation is to skip step 2. Everyone does it once. You'll think, the Copilot draft looks solid, I'll just clean this later. That's the same logic developers use before deploying untested code, usually seconds before production collapses. Skipping verification saves minutes. Recovering from misinformation costs weeks. Now, a critical note about orchestration. In enterprise environments, you can automate part of this loop. Power Automate can route Copilot outputs into an agent validation queue. The agent then attaches metadata, confidence scores, references, and writes verified versions back into SharePoint as authoritative outputs. Copilot continues the conversational editing from there. You don't lose momentum, you gain a feedback system. Here's a bonus technique: parallel prompting. Run GPT-5 and the agent simultaneously on adjacent paths. Let GPT-5 brainstorm structure while the agent validates particular dependencies. Merging outputs later produces both narrative fluency and evidentiary rigor. It's analogous to parallel processing in computing, 2 cores running at different clock speeds, synchronized at merge time for optimal load balance. The hybrid workflow isn't compromise. It's architecture designed for cognitive integrity. You use Copilot for velocity and the agent for veracity, just as aerospace engineers use simulations for speed and physical tests for certification. Skipping either produces fragile results. The point isn't to worship the slower tool, but to assign purpose correctly. GPT-5 for possibility, agent for proof. Admittedly, implementing this rhythm feels tedious at first. You'll groan during that 9-minute verification, but the long-term payoff is operational serenity. Outputs stop haunting you. You never wonder, where did that paragraph come from? Because you can drill straight into the agent log and trace every claim. That's the productivity dividend compliance never advertises: peace of mind. And once you internalize this rhythm, you begin designing your workflows around it. Policies get drafted in Copilot spaces clearly labeled unverified. The agent's outputs get routed through Fabric pipelines tagged verified. Dashboards draw exclusively from the latter. You've effectively partitioned creative flux from compliance gravity. Both coexist without contamination. Now, if you're still tempted to keep everything inside Copilot because it's faster, the next section should cure you. When convenience becomes contamination, this is where theory meets disaster. The mistake is architectural, not moral. Enterprises start using Copilot to summarize regulated content directly: policy libraries, compliance notes, audit logs. Nobody intends malice. They just want efficiency. But what happens next is quietly catastrophic. Copilot generates sparkling summaries from these sources, and those summaries flow downstream into Teams posts, Power BI dashboards, leadership slides. Each subsequent layer quotes the AI's confidence as fact. There's no footnote, no verification pointer. Congratulations, you've just seeded your enterprise with synthetic data. It's beautifully formatted, impressively wrong, and completely trace-free. This contamination spreads the moment those summaries are used for decisions. Executives reuse phrasing in investor updates. Departments bake assumptions into forecasts. Without realizing it, an organization starts aligning strategy around output that cannot be recreated. When auditors request supporting evidence, you'll search through your Copilot history like archaeologists looking for fossils of guesswork. Let's diagnose the chain. Step 1. Copilot ingests semi-structured data, a governance document, perhaps an internal procedure file. Step 2. GPT-5 abstracts and rewrites without binding each assertion to its source node. Step 3. Users share, quote, and repurpose it. Step 4. Dashboards begin to display derivative metrics computed from those unverified statements. The contamination is now systemic. Once it hits Power BI, every chart derived from those summaries propagates uncertainty masked as evidence. And don't underestimate the compliance fallout. Misreported access roles from an unverified Copilot summary can trigger genuine governance incidents. If an Entra audit references those automated notes, you're effectively letting marketing write your security review. It might look clean, it's still fiction. The diagnostic rule is simple, yet rarely followed. Any output that feeds a decision system must originate from the agent's verified pipeline. If Copilot produced it but the agent hasn't notarized it, it doesn't enter governance circulation. Treat it as draft until verified. The same way test data never touches production, generative text never touches regulated reporting. And this connects to a larger architectural truth about the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. Each intelligence layer has a designated purpose. Copilot sits in the creativity layer, a space optimized for drafting and flow. The researcher agent occupies the accountability layer, a domain engineered for citations and reproducibility. When you collapse these layers into one, you undermine the integrity of the entire system, because feedback loops expecting verifiable lineage now receive narrative approximations instead. Think of it like network hygiene. You wouldn't merge development and production databases just because it saves a few clicks. Doing so erases the safety boundary that keeps experiments from corrupting truth. Likewise, using GPT-5 output where agent lineage is expected erases the governance firewall your enterprise relies on. Why does this keep happening? Simple human bias. We equate fluency with reliability. Copilot delivers polished English. The agent sounds bureaucratic. Guess which one the average manager prefers at 5 p.m.? Surfaces win over systems until the system collapses. The fix starts with explicit separation. Label Copilot outputs provisional by default. Route them through a verification pipeline before publication. Embed visual indicators, green for agent verified, yellow for Copilot unverified. This visual governance enforces discipline faster than another policy memo ever will. Because ultimately the real contamination isn't just data, it's culture. Every time you reward speed over proof, you train people that approximation is acceptable. Before long, close enough becomes the organizational ethic. And that's where compliance failure graduates into strategic blindness. Here's the unpleasant truth. Replacing the agent weakens Microsoft 365's architecture exactly the way disabling logging weakens a security system. You can still function, but you can't defend anything afterward. The logs are what give your actions meaning. Likewise, the agent's citations give your results legitimacy. So the next time someone insists on using GPT-5 because it's faster, answer them with 2 words. Governance contamination. It's not dramatic, it's literal. Once unverified content seeps into verified workflows, there's no easy extraction. The only sustainable rule is separation. Copilot generates, the agent certifies. Confuse the two, and your brilliant productivity layer becomes a liability engine with a chat interface. Real enterprise resilience comes not from what you automate, but from what you audit. The rule of separation. In the end, the rule is insultingly simple. Use Copilot for creation, the agent for confirmation. One drafts magic, the other documents proof. The entire Microsoft 365 ecosystem depends on that division. Copilot runs fast and loose in the creativity layer, where iteration matters more than evidence. The agent dwells in the accountability layer, where every output must survive audit, replication, or court scrutiny. Swap them, and you convert helpful automation into institutional self-sabotage. Speed without verification is vanity. Verification without speed is paralysis. The mature enterprise learns to alternate, generate, then authenticate. GPT-5 gives you the prototype. The agent converts it into an evidentiary artifact. The interplay is the architecture, the firewall between confident drafts and defensible truths. Think of Copilot as a jet engine and the agent as the instrument panel. The engine propels you, the gauges stop you from crashing. Ignoring the agent is like flying blind because you feel like you're level. At that point, productivity becomes performance arts. So build every workflow on that separation. Copilot drafts, agent validates, Fabric stores the certified record. Protect the lineage and you protect the enterprise. If you remember nothing else, remember this line. Using GPT-5 for compliance research is like citing Wikipedia in a court filing. It may sound correct until someone asks for the source.